Don't forget about my sister.
Sparkman's family members say she was the woman shot and killed in a Sacramento shopping center on Valentine's Day.
Don't forget that my sister is not here anymore because she was somebody important.
At the Lake Crest Village Shopping Center in Sacramento's pocket.
She never missed saying, I love you. When she exits, she gonna let you know that she loves you. More than life itself, Chasity loved her children. Her children was her world. Everything Chasity did was for her kids.
Families say Sparkman was 26 and a mom to 2 children. And as they gathered, many wearing pink and with heart-shaped balloons, they remembered and grieved.
On a day meant for love, a mother of 2 was brutally murdered. This is the tragic story of Chasity Sparkman. Valentine's Day, a day for romance, for sharing love with those closest to you. But for Chasity Sparkman and her family, February 14th, 2024, became a day of unimaginable horror. What started as a seemingly normal evening would end in tragedy, leaving 2 young children without their mother. What could have driven someone to commit such a heinous act on this day of all days? What darkness lurked beneath the surface of what seemed like an ordinary relationship? Who was Chasity Sparkman? Chastity's story began in Sacramento, California. But it's a story that ended in tragedy, a story that leaves so many unanswered questions. Chasity was one of 20 children born to Alfonso Sparkman. 19 siblings. That's a huge family. And it speaks volumes about the kind of close-knit environment Chasity grew up in. It shaped her, no doubt. It made her who she was. But even in the closest families, darkness can sometimes creep in. Chastity's world revolved around 2 people, her children, Zayon, 8 years old, and Princella, 6. They were her everything. She was a devoted mother, pouring all her love and energy into raising them. Look at these pictures. You can see the love in her eyes. You can see the bond they shared. It's heartbreaking to know what would happen to them. What could possibly lead to such a devastating loss? Chasity was known as a firecracker. That says it all, doesn't it? She had a spark, an energy that drew people to her. She was vibrant, full of life, and passionate about the things she cared about. She was kind, compassionate, and fiercely loyal to those she loved. She was studying psychology at Sacramento City College. She mainly would focus on her music, work, and caring for her kids. Imagine the dedication, a mother of 2, working hard, and pursuing her dreams. But those dreams would never be realized. Her sister, Naina, summed it up perfectly. She was our light. She didn't deserve this. But who was Isaiah James? He was Chastity's husband, the father of her children. Their relationship was troubled, marked by arguments and, according to some reports, controlling behavior. They were separated, but the connection between them was far from over. What happened between them? What led to the horrific events of Valentine's Day, 2024, at the Lake Crest Village Shopping Center? Was it a crime of passion? Was it premeditated? The answers to these questions are crucial to understanding this tragedy. Valentine's Day evening, 2024. The Lake Crest Village Shopping Center in Sacramento. A place where, on any other night, couples might be strolling hand in hand, maybe grabbing a bite to eat, exchanging Valentine's Day gifts. But on this night, the air crackled with a different kind of energy. A dark, ominous energy that foreshadowed the tragedy about to unfold. Chasity Sparkman received a call that evening. A call from her estranged husband, Isaiah James. They were separated, their relationship fractured, but they were still connected by their 2 beautiful children. What did he want? Did he want to talk about Zayon and Princella? Did he want to try and reconcile? Or was it something else entirely? We may never know the exact words that were exchanged, the tone of his voice, the subtle nuances that might have hinted at what was to come. But we do know this. Chasity agreed to meet him. She went to that shopping center. Did she have a bad feeling? Was there a sense of unease in the pit of her stomach? We can only imagine. Chasity arrived at the Lake Crest Village Shopping Center. But Isaiah wasn't alone. Standing beside him was his girlfriend, Ayana Burgos. The presence of another woman, particularly in these circumstances, adds another layer of complexity to this already tragic story. Why was she there? Was she a witness? Was she involved? Or was her presence simply a cruel twist of fate? These are questions that investigators would grapple with in the days and weeks that followed. Imagine the scene: Chasity, a young mother, meeting her estranged husband, the father of her children, and his new girlfriend. The air must have been thick with tension, with unspoken words, with unresolved emotions swirling like a storm. What was Chasity thinking? What was going through her mind as she stood there, face to face with the man she once loved and the woman he was now with? We can't hear what's being said, there's no audio, but we can see the interaction. Chasity and Isaiah are talking. At first, the conversation seems relatively calm, almost civil. But then, something shifts. You can see the tension in their body language. Arms start gesturing more emphatically. Faces tighten. Voices we can only assume are rising. What was the catalyst? What was the one thing that ignited the powder keg of their emotions? Were they arguing about their children? About custody? About money? Or was it something deeper, something more personal, something that had been festering beneath the surface for months, maybe even years? And then, the unthinkable happens. The silence of the Valentine's Day evening is shattered by the deafening sound of gunshots. Multiple shots, piercing the air, ripping through the calm. Chaos erupts. People scream, scrambling for cover, their romantic evening transformed into a scene of terror. But Chasity falls to the ground. She's been shot, multiple times, in the parking lot of a shopping center on Valentine's Day. The cold, hard reality of violence slams into the scene. The festive decorations, the red and pink balloons, suddenly seem grotesquely out of place. Isaiah James flees the scene. He leaves Chasity lying there, bleeding, her life slipping away. Ayanna Burgos is also gone. Where did they go? How did they escape so quickly? Did they have a plan? Or was it a panicked, desperate flight? The police are on the hunt. They need to find Isaiah James, and they need to find him now. The question that echoes through this entire tragedy, the question that haunts everyone connected to this case, is why? Why did Isaiah James do this? What could have driven him to such a horrific, senseless act of violence? What demons was he battling? What darkness lurked in his heart? These are the questions that investigators and Chastity's family are desperately trying to answer. This is a story of love, loss, and the devastating, irreversible consequences of domestic violence. And it's a story that's far from over. Eyewitnesses, shaken and traumatized, began to piece together the events. Reports flooded into the police. Several people described hearing a heated argument, raised voices, just moments before the gunfire. One witness, his voice trembling as he spoke to investigators, recounted the chilling scene. "I saw a woman collapse. She just fell to the ground. And then a man and a woman, they just ran off. They didn't even look back. He just left her there." That man and woman they knew is Isaiah James and Ayanna Burgos. His actions, callous and brutal, left no doubt in their minds. The first responders arrived swiftly, sirens wailing, lights flashing. Paramedics rushed to Chastity's side. Every second was precious. They worked feverishly, assessing her injuries, trying to stem the bleeding. They knew the situation was dire, but they refused to give up hope. They carefully transferred her onto a stretcher and raced towards the waiting ambulance, the flashing lights cutting through the darkness of the night. The ambulance sped towards the nearest hospital, the paramedics praying for a miracle, praying that Chasity would survive. But the miracle never came. Despite the tireless efforts of the paramedics and the doctors, despite their skill and dedication, Chastity's injuries were simply too severe. She succumbed to her wounds. She died. In a sterile hospital room, surrounded by medical equipment, far from the love and warmth of her family, just hours after arriving at the shopping center on Valentine's Day. The news spread like wildfire, devastating Chastity's family, her friends, her community. A wave of grief, raw and agonizing, washed over everyone who knew her. And then, the hardest part, her children, Zayon and Princella, 8 and 6 years old. They had lost their mother. Their vibrant, energetic, loving mother. They were now motherless. The world as they knew it had been irrevocably shattered. How do you explain such a senseless act of violence to children so young? How do you help them understand why their mom is gone? Why she won't be there to tuck them in at night, to celebrate their birthdays, to watch them grow? These are questions that no child should ever have to grapple with. And these are questions that would haunt Chastity's family and her children for the rest of their lives. The violence of that Valentine's Day didn't just steal Chastity's future. It stole a piece of the future from everyone who loved her, leaving a void that could never, ever be filled. The question on everyone's mind was, Who was Isaiah James? What could drive a man to commit such a horrific act of violence against the mother of his own children? The investigation into Isaiah's background began immediately, and a disturbing picture began to emerge. Isaiah's relationship with Chasity was far from perfect. Those closest to them whispered of a history of controlling behavior, of frequent and heated arguments. There were even reports of past domestic issues, incidents that had hinted at the potential for violence. These red flags, though perhaps little at the time, now seemed glaringly obvious in retrospect. Why hadn't anyone intervened? Why hadn't anyone seen the danger signs? These are questions that would haunt those who knew them. As investigators delved deeper into Isaiah's past, a possible motive began to surface: jealousy. Had he been consumed by jealousy over Chastity's desire to move on with her life, to pursue her own dreams? Had his anger boiled over, culminating in this act of extreme violence? Was he unable to accept the separation? Unable to let Chasity go? These are the questions that investigators needed to answer to understand the full scope of this tragedy. And then there was Ayanna Burgos. Her presence at the shopping center that night took on a chilling significance. She wasn't just there. She was with Isaiah when he shot Chasity. Eyewitness accounts and the surveillance footage painted a grim picture. Ayanna was present during the confrontation, present when the argument escalated, and present when Isaiah James pulled the trigger. Her role shifted from potential witness to something far more complex. What was her involvement? Did she know what Isaiah was planning? Did she try to stop him? Or was she a silent accomplice to this horrific crime? The investigation revealed that Ayanna had helped Isaiah escape after the murder. She had aided him in fleeing the scene, knowing he had just committed a horrific crime. Why? What was her motivation? Was she afraid of him? Was she complicit in his actions? These were crucial questions that needed to be answered to bring justice to Chasity and her family. Ayanna's involvement added another layer of complexity to the case, raising serious concerns about her knowledge of Isaiah's intentions and her role in the aftermath of the murder. The search for Isaiah James was now a search for two people, both connected to the tragic death of Chasity Sparkman. With Chasity dead and the community reeling from the shock of such a senseless act of violence, the focus turned to one thing: finding Isaiah James. He had fled the scene, leaving a trail of devastation in his wake. And he wasn't alone. Ayanna Burgos, present at the shooting and now considered a key figure in the investigation, had escaped with him. Isaiah James and Ayanna Burgos didn't stay in Sacramento. They knew the police would be looking for them, and they knew they had to get far away, fast. They made the decision to leave California altogether, hoping to disappear, to vanish into the vastness of the country. The Sacramento Police Department, determined to bring Chastity's killer to justice, launched a nationwide manhunt. They put out an all-points bulletin, alerting law enforcement agencies across the country to be on the lookout for Isaiah James and Ayanna Burgos. Every police officer, every sheriff's deputy, was now searching for these two individuals. Investigators pored over the evidence, meticulously reviewing the surveillance footage from the shopping center, carefully analyzing witness statements. They were piecing together the events of that terrible night, trying to understand what had happened, and, most importantly, trying to track down Isaiah and Ayanna. The information they gathered, the details gleaned from the footage and the interviews, helped to narrow the search, giving investigators a sense of where the fugitives might be heading. The manhunt dragged on, weeks turning into what seemed like an eternity for Chastity's grieving family. Every day that passed without an arrest felt like another injustice. But the police were relentless. They followed every lead, every tip, no matter how small. And then, finally, a break in the case. In March 2024, just a few weeks after the murder, the Sacramento Police Department, working in conjunction with the FBI, received information that Isaiah James and Ayanna Burgos were in New York City. The net was closing in. The nationwide manhunt was about to come to an end. Law enforcement officers in New York City were alerted, and they moved quickly. They located Isaiah and Ayanna, and they took them into custody without incident. Finally, after weeks of fear and uncertainty, Chastity's family and the community had some sense of relief. The two people suspected of being responsible for her death were in custody. But the fight for justice was far from over. With Isaiah James and Ayanna Burgos in custody, the long and difficult process of seeking justice for Chasity Sparkman began. But first, there was the immense, heartbreaking task of saying goodbye. Chastity's family, her 19 siblings, her father Alfonso, faced an unimaginable loss. How do you bury your child? How do you cope with the pain of such a senseless tragedy? The grief was overwhelming, a heavy blanket of sorrow that smothered everything. A funeral was held for Chastity, a gathering of family, friends, and community members who came together to mourn the loss of a vibrant young woman, a loving mother, a cherished sister. The church was filled with tears, with whispered stories of Chastity's kindness, her infectious laughter, her bright spirit. A vigil was also held, a candlelight ceremony where people gathered to remember Chastity, to share their grief, and to offer support to her family. Her father, Alfonso Sparkman, spoke at the funeral, his voice filled with both sorrow and strength. He said, "We will never get her back. That's a pain we will carry with us forever. But we cherish the time God gave us with Chastity. We cherish the memories, and we will keep her spirit alive." His words were a testament to the love and resilience of the Sparkman family, a family that had already endured so much and now faced this devastating blow. But what about Chastity's children? Zayon and Princella. The children were adopted by Chastity's sister, which was her request. They had lost their mother, their protector, their everything. The community rallied around them, offering love, support, and whatever help they could provide. People who had never even met Chastity reached out to her family, offering their condolences and their help. It was a testament to the impact Chastity had on her community, and it was a powerful demonstration of the compassion and generosity of the human spirit. But the question remains, can any amount of community support truly replace a mother's love? Can anything fill the void left by such a tragic loss? These are questions that Zayon and Princella will likely grapple with for the rest of their lives. With the funeral behind them, the focus shifted to the legal proceedings. Isaiah James and Ayanna Burgos were formally charged with first-degree murder. The wheels of justice, though often slow, had begun to turn. The courtroom became the center of the drama. Chastity's family sat in the gallery, their faces etched with grief and a desperate longing for justice. They were there to witness the proceedings, to see the individuals accused of killing their daughter, their sister, held accountable for their actions. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence. Damning forensic evidence, linking Isaiah James to the murder weapon. Compelling eyewitness testimony, placing him at the scene of the crime. The surveillance footage, grainy but undeniable, showing the confrontation, the gunshots, and Isaiah fleeing the scene with Ayanna Burgos. The evidence was overwhelming. The defense, tasked with the difficult job of defending a man accused of such a heinous crime, tried to argue against premeditation. They claimed that the shooting was a crime of passion, a spur-of-the-moment act fueled by anger and jealousy. They attempted to paint a picture of Isaiah as a man driven to desperation, not as a cold-blooded killer. But their arguments fell flat in the face of the overwhelming evidence presented by the prosecution. The trial was long and emotionally draining. Chastity's family had to relive the horrific details of her murder, day after day. They had to listen to the graphic descriptions of her injuries, the chilling accounts of the shooting. It was a painful process, but they were determined to see it through, to ensure that Chastity's killers were brought to justice. Finally, after weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Guilty. Guilty on all counts. Isaiah James was found guilty of first-degree murder. Ayanna Burgos was also found guilty for her role in the crime. A collective sigh of relief swept through the courtroom. Chastity's family, though still grieving, felt a measure of justice had been served. The sentencing followed swiftly. The judge, recognizing the severity of the crime, the callousness of the act, and the devastating impact it had on Chastity's family, handed down the maximum sentence. Isaiah James would spend the rest of his life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Ayanna Burgos also received a significant sentence for her part in the crime. The sentences ensured that they would never have the opportunity to harm another person. For Chastity's family, it was a small measure of comfort in the face of an immeasurable loss. But even with the verdict and the sentencing, the pain remained. The knowledge that Chastity was gone, that her children would grow up without their mother, was a wound that would never fully heal. The trial was over. The verdicts had been delivered. Isaiah James was behind bars, and Ayanna Burgos was also facing the consequences of her actions. But the story of Chasity Sparkman is more than just a true crime story. It's a story that highlights a much larger and deeply troubling issue: domestic violence. Chastity's case is a stark and heartbreaking reminder of the dangers that can lurk behind closed doors, even in relationships that seem loving on the surface. It's a reminder that controlling behavior, verbal abuse, and other forms of domestic abuse can escalate, sometimes with devastating consequences. Chastity's story is a tragic example of how love can turn into violence, how a relationship can become a source of fear and danger. This isn't just Chastity's story. It's a story that plays out far too often in communities across the country. It's a story that needs to be told, a story that needs to be heard, so that we can all learn to recognize the warning signs, so that we can all do our part to prevent future tragedies. If you or someone you know is in danger, please seek help before it's too late. There are resources available. There are people who can help. Don't wait. Don't assume it will get better. Don't let fear keep you silent. Your life, or the life of someone you love, may depend on it. Chasity Sparkman's story is a tragedy. It's a story of love, loss, and the devastating consequences of violence. It's a story that should never be forgotten. Love should never end in violence. Thank you for watching. If you found this video informative and important, please like and subscribe to my channel for more true crime stories that explore the complexities of human behavior and the pursuit of justice. Your support helps to raise awareness about these critical issues.